How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Weather Sponge 5000, and we're going to forecast a 2023-2024 winter season for the United States. So let's get right into it by taking a look at the climate division plot, which pretty much compares the years where there's been a moderate to strong El Nino compared to the long-term average between 1991 and 2020. So in all the years where we've seen either a moderate or strong El Nino, such as the winter of 1951 to 1952, extending all the way up to the winter of 2009 and 2010, we see a clear pattern where temperatures throughout majority of the United States are cooler than average, especially the southern portion of the United States, more specifically the southeast as well as the southwest, and this even extends to the northeast as well. And even the region that's more synonymous with warmer temperatures during an El Nino experiences mainly around average temperatures or slightly below average temperatures when the El Nino pattern is either at a strong or moderate phase. So this should play a pretty big role in our forecast when it comes to the temperatures you should expect. And of course, with cooler temperatures, you should expect more snowfall, at least in the areas where you'll receive average precipitation, which of course during an El Nino in different areas that's not necessarily the case. But if you were to see either average precipitation or slightly above average precipitation, more likely than not you would experience a higher possibility of snowfall. So expect a colder than average winter for much of the southern United States based on what typically happens during a moderate to strong El Nino, and this includes the northeast as well. However, just because years prior during moderate to strong El Ninos have shown a consistency in bringing cooler than average temperatures for much of the United States does not mean that it'll exactly happen just like this, because of course there's other factors that could change the type of temperatures you experience this winter, which I'll go into detail with it a little bit later in the video. However, more likely than not, even with all the other factors aside, we should experience cooler than average temperatures. And now here's the precipitation anomalies for moderate to strong El Ninos for the United States, and we do see it's fairly similar to what we typically expect during any El Nino pattern, as we do see that subtropical jet moves through the southern United States, which does bring more moisture to the southeast as well as more moisture right up along the southern west coast, such as California, Arizona, and even extending into New Mexico. And we see that quite a few that this moisture extends a little bit further northward into the northeast coast, where low pressure systems have the possibility of moving up the east coast and potentially developing into nor'easters thanks to a subtropical jet that could potentially combine with a polar jet to create more potent nor'easters to bring a little bit more moisture further northward up along the east coast. So along the northeast, you definitely need to worry about the possibility of more nor'easters and more significant snowstorms right up along the coast, because when you combine the fact that we're during most of the time we've experienced moderate to strong El Nino, that we see cooler than average temperatures, along with the fact that we also see more moisture than average right up along the coast, I'd expect more nor'easters and more significant snowstorms to impact the east coast. So you definitely need to be aware of that. And then of course for the southeast, we during a moderate to strong El Nino, we see much more moisture than usual, so expect a lot more stormy conditions, potentially more severe weather as well. And if you're hoping for snow right around the southeast, then this could potentially be your best shot at it in quite a while, since of course during an strong to moderate El Nino, we not only see more moisture than average, but temperatures are cooler than average. So of course the possibility of snowfall would be a lot higher this year compared to prior years where we were primarily between a neutral to La Nina phase. So if you're hoping for snow, then this could potentially be the year for you guys. But for the Great Lakes region, we see a clear indication that during a moderate to strong El Nino, it's typically drier than normal, so you should expect drier than normal conditions this winter, even accounting for all the other factors. There could, of course, be that possibility that the other factors outweigh the fact that we're in an El Nino, but most likely you should expect slightly drier than average conditions right around the Great Lakes region, and this includes the Pacific Northwest as well. And like I'm going to show you with the drought monitor a little bit later in this video, we're definitely a lot more likely this year to experience much drier than normal conditions right around the Pacific Northwest and extending into the northern Midwest. So in case you're wondering what typically happens during an El Nino pattern, so this is pretty much the average map for typical El Nino patterns, pretty much combining strong El Ninos, weaker El Ninos, as well as moderate El Ninos, all in just one map based on the typical conditions the average of all those phases produce. And typically during an average El Nino, it's a lot warmer than normal right over the northern United States. This is due to the fact that a low pressure system is located over the northern Pacific, which forces a jet stream to move a lot further northward right over the United States, which does bring a strong southerly flow for the conditions to be much warmer and also drier than average, thanks to the existence of a ridge pushing a lot of low pressure systems away from the Pacific Northwest, while right up along the southern United States, it's a lot more moist and cooler than normal thanks to an amplified Pacific jet stream, or like some people call it, a subtropical jet, which brings a lot more low pressure systems right around this area. And of course, since it's more moist than usual, there's a lot more clouds, which prevents the sun from being able to radiate along the surface and rise those temperatures. So it's typically cooler than average as well, and it's drier than normal right around the Great Lakes region into the Ohio River Valley as well. And for the East Coast, it's definitely variable. It depends. It really more so depends on the other factors in determining whether you experience more moist than average conditions or drier and warmer than average conditions. However, based on the factors I'm going to show you a little bit later in this video, I feel like the Northeast would experience a little bit more moisture than usual, especially the fact that we're in a strong El Nino, so the subtropical jet is more likely to move a little bit further northward to bring more moisture right over the northeast coast. So here's the drought monitor for the United States at this time, and we do see still much of the southern Midwest and a large portion of the Southeast actually is experiencing much drier than normal conditions. This extends into New Mexico and Arizona as well, and even the Pacific Northwest, you guys are experiencing drier than normal conditions. Now, this could play a big role in terms of what type of conditions you experience this winter, because of course, for a drought to develop, conditions need to be in place, or at least dry conditions need to be in place for a long period of time, and if that were to extend into the winter time, which would be the most likely scenario, because during a drought it's already in a set pattern where it's been difficult for low pressure systems to move into the area, so it's likely going to stay that way for the foreseeable future. And when, of course, the soil is a lot drier, there's a lot less water that the atmosphere could pull from, which means that there's overall just less precipitation moving through the drought-stricken areas, and it's likely going to continue into the winter time for a lot of these areas, especially the Pacific Northwest, where already during a typical El Nino you experience drier than normal conditions. So the fact that we're going to be in an El Nino will only make the drought issue worse right over the Pacific Northwest and even the northern Midwest. So in a lot of these areas, I'd expect a little for it to be drier than normal this winter. And also another thing to point out is that during a drought, it's of course a lot warmer than usual, thanks to the fact that since the soil has a lot less water, is holding a lot less water during a drought, then a lot of the shortwave radiation from the sun is absorbed less by the water and more absorbed by the surface. And since the surface warms up a lot quicker than water does, and we should expect warmer than average conditions for much of the northwestern portion of the United States, while the southern United States is still under a drought. And while that may help limit the amount of precipitation you experience early on during the winter, I eventually do expect that the El Nino pattern will take shape and moisten up the atmosphere just enough for the drought to go away. So despite the fact that the southern United States is under a drought, I eventually do expect the El Nino pattern to pretty much shift the conditions to where it's a little bit more stormy than what you've been experiencing over the past few months. So still expect more storms than usual right around the southern United States. And two big patterns we're going to need to take a look at this winter is the Pacific North American Oscillation as well as the North Atlantic Oscillation. So first, let me talking to you guys about the Pacific North American Oscillation, or the PNA for short. So during a positive PNA pattern, we see a big ridge dominate the western half of the United States, which brings a lot more warmer and drier than average conditions over the western half. While during a positive phase, we see a pretty strong low pressure system located right over the eastern half of the United States, which allows a lot more cool air to move further southward, and this typically brings a lot more wet than average conditions and a lot more snowy than average conditions as well, and colder than average conditions. While during a negative phase, the opposite happens. We see that the air pressure is simply a lot lower over the western half, which brings a lot more cooler than average conditions over the western half of the United States, and more snowy than average conditions, while the opposite occurs right around the eastern half of the United States during a negative phase, where we see that the air pressure is a lot higher, which means that there's less storms moving through, less snowfall overall, and conditions are just much warmer than average during a negative phase. And this was a phase that really dominated a lot of last winter, which is the reason why much of the eastern half of the United States had almost record low snowfall. So the PNA pattern definitely does play a big role in terms of how much snow you experience or how cold or warm your winter will be. And the North Atlantic Oscillation is a very similar concept, just a little bit more focused on the eastern half of the United States. During a negative phase, we see that the ridging over the Bermuda Ridge is a lot weaker, as well as the Greenland Low is a lot weaker, which means that the westerly winds are a lot weaker, which allows the cooler air further northward to have a better shot at moving further southward into the United States, which brings a lot more colder and snowy than average conditions, because the westerly winds aren't strong enough to keep the cold air further northward. While during a positive phase, the westerly winds are a lot stronger. We see a stronger ridge, a stronger Greenland Low, and that keeps the cold air further northward, and it's warmer than average during a positive NAO pattern. So this is a current PNA pattern forecast, at least for the early part of the winter, even extending into January. And if you're hoping for snow right around the eastern half of the United States, including the southeast, then this would certainly be good news for you, because the forecast is that we're going to be in a positive PNA pattern, which means that we're likely going to see much warmer and drier than average conditions over the western half of the United States, while the eastern half during a positive PNA pattern would experience colder and snowier than average conditions. We're going to need to see if this keeps up. This is definitely far from certain, but most likely we should be in a positive PNA pattern for a lot of the winter, and it should peak out at around the Christmas time frame. So right around the late December time frame, that could be the peak time period where the major snowstorm could occur, and this even extends into January, just not as strong in January, but still in the positive phase. So I'll say that around mid to late December, we could be in for many snowstorms for the eastern half of the United States. And taking a look at the North Atlantic Oscillation or the Arctic Oscillation, which is a very similar oscillation pattern, we do see that we're most likely going to be in the strongest negative phase right around the late December time period. So that should promote a lot more snowstorms and cooler than average temperatures right around the eastern half of the United States. So I do believe that if you want to see snow this winter, or at least or a major snowstorm, then the time period would be right around mid to late December. But this extends throughout the entirety of the winter. So despite the fact that we're in an El Nino, I think that a lot of the east coast of the United States, which is typically average when it comes to precipitation as well as air temperature, I believe that the negative Arctic Oscillation phase as well as positive PNA phase will push it over to the edge to where the temperatures are a little bit below average as well as precipitation being above average. So that will likely bring more snowfall than usual right over the Northeast this winter and the eastern half of the United States in general. Another thing that makes me believe we're going to see a lot more snowstorms than usual right around the eastern half of the United States is taking a look at what the climatology models are stating, more specifically the NMME model, which combines all the most reliable American computer models into one model to give the most accurate forecast of what you should expect in the more long-term future. And taking a look at the NMME forecast when it comes to precipitation over the next 3 months, the precipitation anomaly, we do see much of the southeast and even the northeast is more likely to experience more moisture or precipitation than usual. And of course, there will be a lot of instances where this precipitation will fall in the form of snowfall, more specifically in the northeast, which is the reason why I do believe that there will be an enhanced risk of snowstorms right over the eastern half of the United States. And typically during an El Nino, it isn't uncommon for the jet stream to dip a little bit further southward into the eastern half of the United States, although the jet stream is very far to the north in the western half. So I do believe that the negative or at least a positive PNA pattern combined with the fact that the climate models are forecasting more moisture than average, I do believe we will see much more snow than usual. And then for the rest of the United States, the computer models are forecasting it to be right around average when it comes to precipitation, maybe below average right around the Pacific Northwest, which I do believe will be the case, especially since a lot of these areas are drought stricken at this time. And then for the West Coast, maybe more moisture than usual, which I do believe will be the most likely scenario with a more powerful Pacific jet that typically builds during an El Nino. Now, when it comes to temperature anomalies, it seems like the computer models are forecasting the western half of the United States to be slightly above normal when it comes to temperatures, while the eastern half is right around average. And I'll lean towards the eastern half of the United States being closer to below average, thanks to the fact that we're going to be in a positive PNA pattern. So that should bring more snowy and colder than average conditions for the eastern half, while especially the western portion of the United States should experience warmer and drier than normal conditions. So here's my entirety of my winter forecast for the whole entire United States. So for the Northeast, I'm expecting much more winter storms than usual because, like I said, we're going to be in a negative North Atlantic Oscillation and a positive PNA pattern, which brings a lot more jet stream dips and colder temperatures right over the Northeast. And there are a lot of El Nino years where we do see the subtropical jet move up the East Coast to bring a lot more nor'easters. So if you're hoping for more snow this winter in the Northeast, then you should definitely get excited this winter, especially since it's going to be a lot more snow than last winter, that's for certain. And then for the southern United States, expecting to be more stormy and colder than usual, and the snow chance will be higher thanks to the fact that we're going to see more storms move over the area, as well as cooler than average conditions. And then it should be more stormy as well for the southwestern portion of the United States, thanks to a stronger Pacific jet stream that builds during an El Nino, while the northwestern portion of the United States should be warmer and drier than normal, thanks to an El Nino pattern typically bringing much more pronounced jet stream raging right over the western half of the United States. And we're going to be in a positive PNA pattern, which typically does bring a stronger ridge to bring warmer and drier than average conditions over the area. So this is the entirety of my winter forecast for 2023 and 2024. If you want even more in detail forecast regarding what type of winter you should expect in your specific location when it comes to snowfall accumulation, or how cold or how warm it is, just make sure to comment down below, and I'll do my best to give you guys more in detail forecast regarding what type of winter you should expect when it comes to snowfall as well as temperature. So make sure to comment down below if you're interested. But that's it for now, guys, and I thank you guys for watching.